Jesse Fleming, and I'm a new assistant professor of special education here at the Mary Lou Fulton Teachers College. What am I most looking forward to in my work? Well, I'm obviously really excited to be here in Arizona, be able to collaborate with schools, the great faculty here at Arizona State, but also really excited about just getting into inclusive settings, into the inclusive classroom, and thinking more about how we can make it a place where all students can be successful, especially our students with disabilities. Thinking about if we can, set up this environment, set up the classroom so that we can reduce the amount of exclusionary discipline that we see for students with disabilities. If we can find a way to support the social communication needs of students with disabilities is something that I'm really looking forward to. And so, just getting into classrooms, seeing what those needs are, and seeing if we can't address those needs for students with disabilities here in Arizona. What gets me out of bed in the morning is really, helping students. I know that's kind of cliched, but that's really what I'm excited about doing. And so, really thinking about how we can, support students' behavior, support more positive behavior in the classroom, how we can support students to develop, long-term friendships, or to even initiate with their peers, or to feel like they belong in the classroom. Just thinking more long-term about our outcomes is what really excites me. Being able to make a real measurable change for students is something that's really valuable and important to me. And so I think oftentimes the research that I read is there's very short-term outcomes. And so we're just looking at if students are initiating or responding versus really thinking about some of those long-term, really important outcomes like student well-being, student happiness, friendship, social status, things of that nature. And so the potential for, developing interventions or conducting research that can have that sort of impact on, disabled people is something that, gets me really excited, gets me up in the morning. If I were to, kind of be able to look into the future and say, what does this look like? Two things that come to mind for me are definitely inclusion in special education, in education broadly. We're really moving towards more inclusive models, because what we found is that students with disabilities benefit so much by being around their other peers, academically, socially. And so I think as a field, we need to continue to move in that direction. I don't think education is necessarily set up in K-12 schools so that all students can be successful in inclusive settings, but I think that should be a goal of having students included in schools. And it doesn't necessarily have to be in the general education classroom. Just thinking about ways that we can include students with disabilities in every aspect of our schools, of our society, I think is something that we're going to continue to move towards. At least I hope that that's the direction that we go. The second area that I think we're beginning to move towards is this idea of neurodiversity, of really valuing students and individuals who think differently, or communicate differently, or different ways of being. I think that there's been a lot of positive diversity initiatives in K-12 schools, in universities, in society. But I think one piece that's often missing from those initiatives is this idea of neurodiversity and valuing the strengths that students with disabilities bring to our classroom, instead of taking a traditional deficit approach of these are the things that this person can't do. We're looking at the strengths that they have, bringing those in, we're highlighting those, we're valuing those, and then we're using those strengths, we're building off of those strengths to support these students and teach them and help them be successful. And I think we still have a ways to go in that regard, but I'm hopeful that that's the direction that the field takes. I think a lot of interventions in the area of special education focus on only students with disabilities making changes. And I don't think the onus can solely be on the shoulders of these students to be the ones to make changes. I think we have to begin educating peers, teachers, and parents about how we can better value and understand and accept people who think differently, people who communicate differently, people who live very different lives. I think that's super important because for so long, the research on this topic has only been, well, students with disabilities need to learn how to do this, or students with disabilities need to learn how to do this. But for example, if we look at social interactions or social communication interventions, they rely on two people to communicate, right? Like it can't just be one person who has to learn how to communicate with this other person. You're reliant on two people wanting to and being willing to communicate with each other. And so often what we see is we do interventions for students with disabilities, but rarely do we target those peers at a class-wide or a school-wide level. And so I think it's so important to be able to begin to make this shift in society, to start in our schools, for our students, our teachers, or our parents to understand and learn about the value that these individuals bring to our classroom. And once students begin to value diverse forms of communicating, then they can sit down next to someone who might communicate with, a communication device, or might not look you in the eye when they're talking to you, or, might not know how to start a conversation with you. And that'll be okay. And they'll want to communicate with this person because they value them as a human being, and they value the things that they bring to the classroom, that they bring as a peer, as a friend, and that these individuals are important and worthwhile. And that's really where we want to be, is where every student, regardless of, their race, their ethnicity, their background, the socioeconomic status of their parents, their religion, whatever it might be, and especially, if they have a disability or if they think and communicate differently than you, that we value those differences in society. We value those differences in our classroom, because those differences is what, make our classrooms, our schools, and really our society a beautiful thing.